Right, we're locked in, you're locked on, we are live, and this is Misaligned. Welcome to another episode of your podcast where we have intellectual, political, religious, and miscellaneous debates on topics crossing the international frontier. Um, from everything from Pan-Africanism from the European perspective. You're joined today by your hosts, Cross, Yemi, Farouk, and Jab, and we're having a bit of an interesting slant on a couple of different conversations that we've had. It's a bit of a blend. It's an interesting one suggested by Farouk. But without further ado, maybe I'll just hand over to our esteemed moderator and king debater, Yemi.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us again today. Just to double check, is my audio, video, is it working? I always kind of worry that I've got some connectivity problems in the background. But yeah, we are talking about something that I personally expect is an interesting topic. And I say that because it seems to, I think it almost touches on everyone. I don't, it's hard to imagine people being anyone who's totally disinterested in this. So, we're talking about gender again. I think we've done something about gender before, but we're thinking a bit more specifically now about gender and how it intersects with religion and power. And I suppose one of the reasons why this might have come to the fore at this time is, we've got a new pope, and congratulations to the faithfuls. There's lots of celebration and lots of almost sort of, the admiration and respect that comes with all of that process. But it begs the question, lots of questions, but we're looking at one question today. Okay, why is the Pope always male? And should it be so? Should it always be so? And with the smile on Jab's face, I suspect that Jab will be happy to take the bull by the horns and just, why is the Pope always male? Should it always be male? Should, yeah. What do you make of it?
Why is Misaligned always for men?
Good question. we might talk about that another time.
I didn't see that one coming.
I didn't see that.
That's a fair question, and I suspect what you might be driving at there, but I'll let you speak for yourself, is that sometimes some things are by design, but that can also be complicated sometimes by just being what it is, not necessarily designed, just kind of happen that way. But I don't know, you asked the question.
I wanted to just be lighthearted. That's why I asked, because we've got four men talking about female issues, and there's no feminine voice here today.
Yeah.
So why is the Pope always male? I think it's church tradition. Is it something we can change, or is it immutable? I think maybe that's the more important question. Is it immutable, or is this something that we can change? But I think all of that comes down, in my view, to interpretation, and whether you take the view that traditions and Bible can change, or doctrine can change with time, or whether they actually just stay exactly as they were 2,000 years ago and forever. And we would very much appreciate that debate has been going on for centuries. It hasn't changed. I'm not sure that it's going to stop anytime soon. And I have heard some people say that maybe actually similar to LGBT, people kind of say, well, maybe women need to have their own separate hierarchy, as it were, almost like maybe their own sort of church within the Catholic Church. Now, whether that is, I suppose maybe that's something we can have a look at and debate today. If you think about maybe, let's say, the LGBT, I used to ask, why do you insist on being a part of a church or an assembly that, I don't want to use the word discriminate against you, but that excludes you, why don't you just form your own organization based on your understanding of the scriptures and just have your own system? And then you can have, maybe a gay bishop, a gay pope, whatever it is, type of thing. So maybe you can make a similar argument for women. But having said that, like I say, it all boils down to how people interpret scriptures. There are people that feel that it's about time that we had a female pope. Yeah. So
Okay.
I think I'm going to leave it broadly. That's how I'm looking at this subject here, but we can go
Yeah.
into maybe
I
more
suppose
specific.
that begs a specific question. The sort of very good and an interesting way that you've approached this is spiritual authority inherently gendered. What can we take out of the organization of the Catholic Church and other religions, probably religious organizations? For is gender an issue within spiritual authority, and should it be? Will it always be?
Is that directed to me?
Yes, Farouk.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Misaligned, panelists and those and our viewers. I would take a more broader approach, a broader framework to trying to understand why the Pope can't be a female, why priests aren't female, cardinals aren't female, imams can't be females, and I'm sure in many other cultural and religious traditions, there are ceilings that women cannot cross. And my framework is that kind of understands the matter from a pragmatic, practical, and evolutionary adaptation by humans in all societies to biology that has inadvertently, in some cases, deliberately in other cases, led to outcomes and led to the way things are set up within the Catholic Church, outside the Catholic Church, within African societies, European societies, Japanese, Chinese societies all over. I didn't think at the outset of the alpha male, the initial male and female humans set out to set impediments to women, to their mothers, wives, sisters, aunts, and nannies. Rather, in our attempt to adapt to our biology, to be pragmatic about it, and as we began to trade and accumulate wealth, and as civilization evolved, we adapted in ways that has led to very, very, very tragic outcomes for members of society. Today, we're speaking about females, but there have been tragic outcomes for Black people, for gays, for lesbians, for disabled, for twins, as we evolve culture, there have been tragic outcomes for different parts, but today we're focusing on women. And what's this biology? This biology is the extra X chromosome that a woman has. And what has this led to? It's led to a uterus and the mammary gland. And what are the pragmatic adaptations to it? What are the consequences of this biology? Women become pregnant. They carry babies for 9 months. Then they breastfeed. And then what are the pragmatic adaptations to that? While carrying it, they can't run, they can't gather, they can't run as fast. They can't gather as fast when they are heavily pregnant and carrying babies. They can't fight, they can't protect societies for pragmatic reasons, right? Societies evolved around then putting them back into certain roles, caregiver, mothers, nursing, caring, versus the man that then goes out to hunt, gather, become wealthy, become powerful, become kings, become emperors. And now imagine this. Yemi, we discussed this theory. You remind me later of how very small impacts thousands of years ago, very small changes 1,000 years ago can lead to very big effects many years on. So this pragmatic adaptation between my ancestor 40,000 years ago saying, my wife, you remain in the cave, look after our baby, breastfeed, protect, while I go out to hunt and gather, means I have access to more resources. If you think about going out to gather and accumulate in today's world, I'll be wealthier, my career will progress faster, I'll get more promotion, I'll become CEO. And you can see that inequality along all of that line. But also conquest. My cave ancestor tells his wife, wait there while I go and capture that new land. I'll be the king. She'll be my queen. And I think this biology and pragmatic adaptations to it has led to how societies have built cultures and institutions around this pragmatic attempt to pragmatically adapt to things. How might that reflect on religion? Religion is socially created, just as society is. In my view, the evidence of that is across many cultures, across many times, religions have evolved, and I think for similar reasons. Therefore, power is a great thing. When men accumulate power, they can accumulate wives, they can accumulate land, they can accumulate servants, and then we hold on to this advantage. We reinforce it. We prevent change. We argue against change, and at that level, it becomes political. I'm born as a prince. I want all of that. I'm not going to, in the name of equality, throw that all apart. So it becomes complex, a complex web of biology, sociology, politics, and then resistance to change. So I'll stop there for now, using that framework to understand how the inequality evolved, why it exists, and why it's difficult to change. People don't give up the advantage easily.
That's fabulous. I think that begins to then beg a new question. I think you've really done justice to that question. Is are there societal differences? Because what you described, certainly, I think I'm aligned with that. I can see it, but I also imagine that it wouldn't be to the same extent in all different cultures, because there would then be there could potentially be cultural nuances that then tweak things a little bit. So my question to Cross might be something like, is it always that way? Are there differences within African societies or say other societies that kind of get around some of that biology and promote women more than some other cultures do?
Can I sneak in something from the last episode? The last episode, we talked a lot about how technology in particular, and evolution then means that women can influence their biology and therefore begin to partake in things that traditionally they could not partake in. But the other thing we didn't mention last week was societal values. They are conservative and open societies. There are societies that allow debate and those that don't allow debate. There are societies where we promote free speech to an extent and those that don't promote. And I think all these traditions then feed into the kind of conversations people can have, the kind of argument they can have, and how change is advanced. So yes, within African societies, there are more open ones. In Nigeria, for example, the Yorubas, southern Nigeria, a bit more. There's a bit more. I mean, it's conservative on many levels, but there's a bit more openness, for example, say compared to places like further north in Kano, for example.
Or in some aspects, even compared to Europe. So don't quote me on this. I'll have to double check. But I know that there are monarchs in Nigeria, and I know some monarchs in southwest Nigeria, where the female can be next in line to the throne, irrespective of whether they've got brothers. Okay, so this is not because in the UK, if you don't have brothers, it's irrespective, and I know that there are.
Absolutely, I can quote you on that because I know in my culture that's also the case. But I'll allow Cross answer your question now. I just wanted to put in there that there's conservative, open conversations, and there's evolution. Jabs talked about whether religion allows change. In fact, as we speak, religions are changing and evolving. When you focus on the now, it might not be so. When you zoom out and look at all of history, there was a time it was a Catholic Church. And then there was the Orthodox Church. And then there was Protestantism. And then within those traditions, when you zoom out over time, all cultures, including religions, are evolving That might be slow, I might not be apparent in real time. But when you look at it, people have challenged doctrine, they've challenged fixed things. I know there are churches that allow female priests, and they may not be called the Catholic Church. I know the last Pope was very open and progressive. That's how change comes, even in very conservative settings. Thanks.
Thank you. Cross.
Right. So it's an interesting one that you've raised, and I've put a few notes down. Just across the conversation.
As always.
As always. So for me, I think there's two conversations here. There's one around spiritual authority and spiritual foundational elements around it. What can you do? What can you get to based off of the spiritual doctrine of whatever religion that we're talking about, in this case Christianity, or these Catholicism, whatever it is.
Catholicism.
Catholicism. Thank you very much. I can actually pronounce that word now. And then the second being biological capability and interests. And that is to the points, very similar points to which Farouk has already raised, and we're having the conversations about around the first thing being, for quite a long time, humans we've created a set of roles as humans. And the idea that somehow, and this has taken us about 100,000 years, come from those hunter-gatherer days to today. But that doesn't take into cognizance the fact that it's taken almost 6 million years for us to evolve from our prehistoric ape-like ancestors, if you believe in evolution, to get here. We're not going to evolve out of that in a couple hundred years. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be 10, 20 years of people with blue hair running around with nose, septum rings and stuff, shouting about free the woman and give them power. That's not going to do anything. We've evolved a very specific way of being over time. That is not just going to change. Now, if we go into these two key pieces, I'll just basically just go into that. And the first one being the spiritual authority and the spiritual foundational elements. The reality is Christianity has always put men as the head of the home, but also as the head of general systems and structures. The hierarchy is children, women, fathers, and then God or the church. If you look across almost all anthropological religions where there's some kind of God that is based off of a human-like characteristic, that is almost always a man. Earth itself tends to be female because Earth is fertile and converts seed into plants. But the creator, the one who moves those resources out, is always male, and that hierarchy has always existed. So from a spiritual perspective, you go into Christianity. Christianity does not allow women to lead because men are better, quote unquote, better leaders according to religion. Why is this the case? This is the second part where we talk about the biological capabilities and interests. There's an interesting framework that's used to understand human personalities, and it's called the Ocean Framework. I'm sure you've all heard about this. You know about the Ocean Framework, right? Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, assertiveness, I think, is it? Agreeableness.
Agreeableness.
And neuroticism. And women, when you start thinking about how this works, generally women have the characteristics skewed in a way that doesn't necessarily permit them to be as effective leaders, whether through interests or whether through ability to execute in terms of what they do. For example, agreeableness. To be a very effective leader, you have to be very disagreeable. You have to be able to come out to look at everybody and say things. I mean, the studies, they're there. I get it. I see that. I know that. I get it.
Misaligned.
Well, misaligned. The studies are clear on this, that generally, in order to be an effective leader of an organization or a set of people, especially as the number of people you're leading increases over time, you need some level of disagreeability. In order to be able to progress in your career, you need to be disagreeable. These things it's fact, and I'm more than happy to share the studies that show these things.
So can I interject just for a quick second then? Mm-hmm. So because we're talking about the Pope, we're talking about this role, but with reference to the papal election just last week.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any scripture that you would use to support that framework? And do you think that is why the Catholic Church has said categorically that only men can be popes?
I wrote some scripture down, but I don't know if the issue with it is it's not very direct, because Jesus didn't specifically say, for example, no women are allowed to be able to do XYZ. But think about how Jesus did his actual ministry. He selected all of his disciples were men, all of them. There's no exception. Women always had the secondary role.
Mary Magdalene was in the sort of background, but you're
Well,
right.
That's my point. So, and this is an interesting thing that Pope Francis did, and we can talk about this. But some positions and roles were created for women generally in the background through Jesus's approach. So women held positions of power, but they didn't hold formal authority, which is important because this feeds into women's capabilities under the ocean framework. The women are better.
So what framework do you think?
One second. Let me land this one and then you can go into that. But women are better at influencing through empathy and other more emotional capabilities than men are. We're a lot more direct. We're a lot more focused on logical outcomes and specific deliverables than women.
Okay.
Women can read people.
Let me interject.
Sorry, Farouk, if you don't mind, just give me 2 minutes. So the first thing to say is to answer Jab's question. There are some scriptures that have been pulled up by people specifically. So 1 Corinthians 14:34 says, women should keep silent in churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but they should be in submission, as the law also says. So that's one scripture that I know, people have referred to kind of try to justify this. Then the second thing, quickly, Farouk, if you don't mind, to address this ocean framework and how that kind of separates men and women into leaders and not quite effective leaders. Across, I think you might be reading too much into the ocean framework. You're right. So you can, the psychologists have done a lot of work around that. And what tends to happen is that all of those 5 limbs of the ocean, they come in a bell called distribution, a natural distribution. So, and you're right, yes, if you look at the agreeableness, for example, the curve skews further ahead for women, okay? And if you look at the being disagreeable, it skews further the other way for men. And that's why men are on average a little bit more aggressive, more disagreeable, and almost all of the prisoners in every country are men. So in the UK, like 94, 96% of all prisoners are men, right? So, but that doesn't mean that women cannot be leaders. It depends, firstly, on what you are leading. Okay, not all leadership positions need you to be disagreeable. That's just not correct.
I didn't say that, and if I did, let me correct that, because it sounds. Right. Yeah, I think you're addressing something I wasn't actually going down the route of. When it comes to positions that require decisive action, where there's no communitarianism, you're not having that sort of group agreement piece. So, for example, highly competitive industries that require very decisive action, say startups, etc., within tech, things that even even in medicine, to be honest, in some areas of medicine, in terms of being able to make decisive actions about what course of action to take, generally, again, it tends to be men. Men tend to be far more logical, far more disagreeable, far more willing to take actions that others don't want to take.
Can I come in here just to warn the panel and warn our audience that we should not be waylaid. Now,
thank you.
We should not be waylaid.
Farouk, please let me bring you back. Let me bring you back to where you were. So let's not
whoa! Someone's bringing it back. Is it bringing it back? Is it Jab? Is it me? Everybody's bringing it back.
No, one sec, please. Please let me have this for a second, please.
Okay, you go on.
Yes. So, Cross, I want to bring you back to approximate you to Farouk. So Farouk has laid out this biological technology basis, which I think is really very important. I think it's very foundational. It makes sense. Yeah. So psychology, social sciences, you can, the subject to interpretation, it depends on which school you're coming from, because psychologists would also disagree on, X, Y, Z and that sort of thing.
Not all of it. So this ocean one, the data is quite good. It's
Okay.
not everything.
Let Ijabla make his point, because I'm interested in where he's going.
So where I'm going with this is this, right? So it started off, Yemi, when I said why is misaligned for people talking about women, right? And you said, are some things just the way they are? And it kind of also where I'm going with this, because so when you look at the script, let's use the Bible because we're talking about the Pope now. Did God just say, it doesn't matter, I am in charge, this is what I want? We're not going to reason here. This is just what I want you to do. I just want men to be in charge and women to just follow, right? So regardless of what biology did and all of that sort of thing, was that
But that would have come out of, so what Farouk is saying, if I understand correctly.
No, I'm coming to Farouk.
Yeah, because men created religion. So what you're saying that was created is our biology created us and we created religion, basically. That's it. And so then you can draw the
precisely that's precisely my framework. And that's the warning I was going to give about the ocean framework. Because we could be waylaid. The ocean framework explains how things are. And it's reasonable, it makes sense, it's logical. My biological framework, biology, sociology, politics, and power, attempts to explain why things are. So why did men create religion? They are more interested in control. Why do they lead it? Because they reserve that power and control to themselves. So the ocean framework attempts to explain the correlations between these positions and how things are. But in terms of why we evolved in that way, remember, Christianity, the first Christians were named in Antioch 2,000 years ago. We have documented history of how humans have organized themselves, for 40,000 years. There was nothing novel in the way Christianity organized society by putting men above women. The ancient Romans and Greeks that worshipped Jupiter and the sun god, and the ancient Egyptians and the religions and ideologies before them organized the same way. So Christianity is not a cause of.
It's a consequence of.
It's a consequence of.
Yeah.
It only evolved 2,000 years ago. Islam only evolved 2,000 years ago. Even if we take the claims of Islam that Abraham was a Muslim and Jesus was a Muslim, the Jews evolved 5,000 years ago. Even if we accept that claim.
Just permit me to jump in. I think what you've just said, because I mean, I can't be more aligned to anything than what you've just said. And I think this is where I draw my inspiration from, that you can't be criticizing religion in a way because it's just a fallout of, it's a necessary fallout of how things have been, right? So you have to take a panoramic view and just understand it as a consequence that we then need to find a way to engineers. We've done lots of things that are biological consequences. For example, the survival of the fittest. It's a biological consequence, but we've done something about it, right? If I go kidnap a child now and
don't say child. If as the Old Testament tells you go and kidnap a lady you want to marry now, we'll throw you in prison.
Yes, you go to prison. So
whereas 5,000 years ago, it was survival of the fittest. Now you have to find nice words to toast that babe.
So for all the consequences that religion has bestowed on us that we have now come to recognize isn't working, we have the capacity, as we have changed lots of things in the past that are almost, in some sense, consequences of wiring. We've done it. There's precedence here, and I'm hopeful that with the religion aspect as well, we will do it.
Okay, so let me ask you a question then.
So just to complete my point, ocean framework, great. Mm-hmm. It explains correlations and how things are. It doesn't tell us why. The why is in.
But we don't need why though, right?
No. So why did the earliest Christians say men should lead? Why did the earliest Muslims say men to lead? There's a reason to that, and I think the biology theory, the biological framework of adaptation explains the why. But it is also true that when you draw the bell curve, men are more assertive.
Farouk, this is exactly, Farouk, this is where I'm going with that question, because you guys have buried me before
just before you go into the question. There's a comment that we've got here about being agreeable doesn't mean lacking assertiveness, and I think that probably addresses
100%.
100%. But that's wrong.
And the point I had forgotten there was, is there something in the biology of the biological role and evolution of women that means being agreeable makes them perform the implications of what the uterus and the mammary gland imposed on them? That kind of explains a lot.
And there are different ways to arrive at assertiveness. Okay, so
yes.
there's a more male type of assertiveness, and there's a more female type of assertiveness. And
please tell me, I'm sure everybody watching right now will be curious to understand how you can be assertive without being, how you can be assertive while being agreeable.
So correct me if I've misunderstood what being assertive means, but you're talking about being able to execute your kind of ideas and make it come to fruition, make people
go and ask your wife how she can be agreeable and effective.
And I can tell you this.
No, effective is fine. Yes, but not assertive.
Go and ask your wife. Go and ask your wife how you can be agreeable, hugging, kissing, and get things done.
No, but that's not assertive.
They've become masters at it. We've had empires that have been taken over by mistresses, by the wives.
Correct.
We have households that are run from those in that role have mastered it over time, and they are equally as effective and influential.
To be fair, though, Cross didn't debate that because because once we understand the bell curve, the point he's trying to make with that ocean framework is that the vast majority, and in some cases it is correct. I just think it's not correct in the leadership case. So in cases
but it is. But go on.
It isn't. No, it isn't. So in cases like commission of crime and violent crimes, for example, that framework works. And again, that's why I'm pointing out that it's not a fuzzy psychology thing. The data is as strong as anything you can bring in biology or physics. I can tell you this. So there's no society in the world where there are more female murderers than males. You're just not going to find it. There's nothing you can do. It's just not going to happen. And there's a reason for that. There are biological reasons that make men do those sort of horrible things more than women do. And that's captured in some of that psychological data. So yeah.
Sorry, isn't that by the way? Sorry,
answer the question.
Part of the why. Sorry, I think that's part of the why chromosome isn't it, because there is a chromosomal condition, I can't remember the name, where you get an extra Y, where you're practically all criminals because they are aggressive and they are just biologically, just because that's how they're made up. So women have two X's and males have an X and a Y. So that might explain the reason why men have bigger, body weight, muscle mass,
and then that size advantage, that power advantage, that size and power advantage does confer on us practical advantages in war, in conquest, in power.
I want to go back to the comment.
Let me go back. Sorry. Cross, 1 second, please. Let me just please give me a moment, because you guys never allow me to answer this question. Okay. So Farouk suggested that the people who wrote the Bible were familiar with the framework he's described, and maybe that's why he said, okay.
They were not familiar with it. They were pushed by it. They were influenced by it. You don't have to know something for it to be working on you. So I don't need to know anything about gravity. That's what's keeping me on the ground. I don't need to know anything about it.
So my question then is, we do know obviously that there are other traditions religions where gods are females, goddesses. Yeah. And there are other traditions where women are queens and they lead men and soldiers to war. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, of course. Which ones? Which ones that don't have a superior? Hold on. Wait. Which ones don't have at the top a male dominant figure?
Okay, so have you heard of
So
people like Queen Amina, for instance, in
and
Yeah,
even
of
in
course. Everybody
even
knows
in
Phenomenal.
jabs, to
yeah?
specifically answer your question, remember when we talk about frameworks and whatever we talk about in life, there would always be in the
An
normal
exception.
Gaussian curve. There will always be the 5% here and the 5% there.
Exactly.
There
It
are
won't.
traditions where
Yeah.
they are.
Like
I mean, for example, in the animal kingdom, whereas in most of the animal kingdom, the male leads the pack, hunts, and is the king. But in the hyenas, have females that are larger and that lead the pack. Would then that mean that if you evolve a framework that say male always lead for biological reasons, there won't be exceptions? That would
There's
be one
no rule.
explanation for.
There's no rule that doesn't
the
contain.
exception,
Yeah,
the
so
exception
that would be
always
one practical
even
explanation for situations where women lead. In the Hindu religion, we have female gods. Women are revered, and I know there are certain traditions where there's feminine power. Even in the Yoruba Igala tradition, feminine traits like agreeableness, ability, cunningness, deceit,
They
are amplified.
confer certain types of power. They confer
Yes, that confer certain kind of
another
power.
type of power.
So human societies are
Yeah.
very complex.
Yeah.
And indeed, whereas we are recognizing today and discussing explicitly why men are powerful, progress more, there are aspects of the female energy and female tact that actually confers power and influence. And certain societies may, as a result of interaction with other people around them, in their environment, have evolved and amplified those feminine energies. And I think that might explain why we have that. And by all means, I'm not saying one framework explains everything. It's just a way of looking at the world and understanding how things came to how they are. It is by no means, it by no means explains everything. Not,
Okay.
I don't think anything does.
So I'm going to have to jump in here for the sake of moderation because we can go on about this till daybreak. I'm sure about it. Patriarchy. Okay, how does this tie into anything we're saying? I think Cross is itching to go, but is there a patriarchy? What does it mean, or is it one of these words that's just thrown around without meaning? Does it mean anything? If it does, is it a good thing or a bad thing? What do we do about it?
I think we're going back. Let me just reset my brain because my brain was still firing on a couple of other cylinders in
I know,
different
I
parts.
know.
I need to just move it here. So when we're talking about patriarchy, in my mind, all I think about is a hierarchy of competence. I'll give you an example. If you go to a nursery, right, and it can be a really big nursery that they have 20, 30 staff, I can assure you that 95% of those staff are going to be female. Why? Because it's a female environment within nursing as well. The vast majority of nurses are female. The vast majority of teachers are female. The vast majority of people that exist within the hospitality industry, retail, government, which is interesting to look at when you look at the statistics as well, tend to be female. Does that mean there's a matriarchy in a very specific set of areas? No, I don't believe there's a patriarchy. I believe there's a system of competence. People are competent, and going back to Farouk's argument earlier as well about biology, we've become competent at certain things. Men used to go out to hunt and would be protecting the family and fighting all the animals, the beasts, the bears, etc. And then the women were taking care of the children and going to do the bits around the gathering and making sure that the home was nice and comfortable for the men. So the men have built capabilities in a very specific set of areas. As a consequence of that, over time, we've built society to reflect our biological inclinations over this period of time. So society at the moment, right now, reflects our biological dispositions, how we are. If you look around everything in the world right now, if we were to strip it back 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 100,000 years, we're still going to behave the same way. We're adding a few different guardrails here and there to make things softer. But it's the same things that drive us. Men are driven by control, power, dominance, and status, and the ability to have sex. That's just what it is. That's what we want. We want to be able to have sex with as many women as we want. Gather all of them, put them in one place, and then get all of them, the ones that we want. Women are generally driven by nurturing, caring for, empathy, etc., and general communalism, keeping the community and society together while focusing on getting the best man or the best mate that they can get. that has not changed in over 100,000 years. Show me a society where that's different. So I think when we talk about this applies when we're talking specifically about this conversation, we're talking about the papacy and the Catholic Church, etc. The same concept applies. We're looking at a society or at a specific structure that focuses on competence rather than just power or patriarchy. I don't believe there's a patriarchy. I believe there's a system of competence.
Okay, so I if I can just say something very quickly before I pass it on to either Jab or Farouk. I think that to some extent I align with you, but largely I'm misaligned. And I think our alignment comes to the extent that I agree that often people pick on a word or a concept or even a problem and then want to stretch it to limits that it then becomes useless. I say this a lot with racism, with sexism, with patriarchy. So every time you have more men doing something and excelling at it, some people point to you that that's evidence of patriarchy. And I think I am aligned with you to say, in effect, that's nonsense. Because if you go out to the building sites as we speak, it's like 99% men. And if I'm driving back from work at midnight, or 99% of the people doing the road construction at night are men. Is that sign that they're systematically excluding women and they're discriminating? No, the women don't want to be out at 1 a.m. building roads. In most cases, they have more. They have different needs, and understandably so, on average. So I agree to that extent, but I disagree to the extent that then explains every disparity you see between men and women. I think there are structural discrimination, even if it's not present in every sector. It certainly is present in enough sectors for us to think about it. But I also align with you to the extent that I agree that some of those disparities are a result of biology, as Farouk has very well described. I'm not going to go over it. I think we are a consequence of our biology. Where I totally misalign with you is that we're not. So you take a fatalistic view that because we are a product of our biology, then we're fixed. No, we're doing things that our biology even 100 years ago could never have comprehended. I can jump on an aircraft in London tonight. I'll be in Abuja in 6 hours. Like we have re-engineered everything to make things that we couldn't do years ago possible now. And what it also means is that we have equalized. Okay, I say the equalize, or we are equalizing the sexes. I think the future of mankind is that we will get to a point where there'll be no difference. It'll be about interest. Right? It'll be about what are you interested in and personally capable of. And I think we're moving closer and closer to that. Most of the women that I work with doing the same job, apart from maybe some constraints that biology might put on them, like, they go off for maternity and I can get some things done before they come back and maybe, get some tasks done. Apart from that, there's nothing in our biology that puts me at an advantage to them. I think they can do. In many cases, I would argue the contrary, because there are times where actually being a bit maybe less assertive, as we said, or a bit more compassionately so, can actually be a huge advantage, even in leadership roles. Jab.
Yeah, let me cut in there. Let me bring in the comments. Jones. Oludotun Jones says, agreeable assertiveness is me saying, Mr. Cross, I respect your view, but I'm misaligned. Versus disagreeable assertiveness, which might sound like, Oga Cross, you are wrong, and here is why. Jones further said, Yemi is a good example of agreeable assertiveness.
I'm going to go back. I mean, I think that's
someone is doing psychoanalysis in the background.
Yes. Well done, Jones, for your engagement. I am aligned with you.
Yes.
I want to take on.
Hang on. Wait. No. That addressing a comment to me, I need to address it, right? I have to. No, I have to. I'm being disagreeable. So I need to disagree.
That's why you're the leader. That's why you're the leader of the podcast.
No, but to that, because Jones has raised 3 points. The first point was being agreeable doesn't mean lacking assertiveness. I'm going to go back to that. And I disagree. I don't think you can be assertive without being disagreeable. Assertion is putting your point ahead of others, which means you have to disagree. You cannot be disagreeable and assertiveness. It's an oxymoron. It's like being a white black man. It's like, what does that even mean? It doesn't make any sense. Agreeable assertiveness. I understand the word mixture, that's being put here in agreeable assertiveness is me saying it. This is
have you ever heard about speaking softly and holding a big stick and wielding a big
doesn't change the fact
have you ever
that
heard about it?
Yes, but it doesn't change the fact that
it was said by a man.
Fantastic. It still doesn't change the fact that you're being disagreeable, because you're disagreeing with the concept and you're being disagreeable. You're saying
Cross, the idea of concept, Cross, the idea of agreeing and disagreeing they are not fixed concepts. They are not fixed. It's a spectrum.
Oh God,
it's a world of gray, it's a world of nuances. So you are looking at this as I disagree, I don't disagree. Maybe that I agree, but here's a nuance.
It's a bimodal distribution to a large extent.
There are leaders that get people to do things, and that leadership style may not be about being disagreeable, but maybe about mobilizing people to do things they will otherwise not do, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to take the conversation out of there, but there's something you said earlier I'd want to address before jabs come in. You talked about patriarchy being an organization or a reflection of competence. Yes, I think that's a very dangerous thing to say.
Dangerous, though. Okay, go for it.
Yes, I actually I thought about that word very carefully. Now, I use the word dangerous because it could be misunderstood. If my understanding of what you're saying is that because over thousands of years, men have gone to war, men have fought, men have dug, men have built skyscrapers, bridges, carried stones, built the pyramids. If because of that reputation, which originally is due to biology, but because we adapted to it that way, we've repeated over generations, and therefore that's the competence you're talking about, then I agree with you.
Okay.
In that sense, in that same light, if we say women are better at caring, showing empathy, understanding, showing strategic understanding and managing, because as a result of adaptation to biology, they care their mothers, their daughters, their sisters, they listen. So they are more competent at as deploying those skill sets. Then yes, I would agree that competence can come through reputation, through evolution,
Can we please give Jab the next word? I think we are taking is agreeableness for granted.
Not if he said I'm
So on that point, let me finish. So on that point of competence, if that's what you're saying, that society is organized because men naturally would rather go out in the middle of the night, as Yemi said, climb skyscrapers, dig tunnels, because as we adapted, we are more competent. That's fine. But if it's competence in the terms of ability to deliver on the job, in the sense that competence is understood within the context of a job description, I don't think there's evidence that men are naturally more competent than women.
There is.
When we
Jab, please. I think
let me finish. When we look at it that way, so does patriarchy exist? Yes. Is it a bad thing? I think the answer is more complex than that. As I said from the beginning, patriarchy is an adaptation to biology. There are practical reasons why things are the way they are. There are practical reasons why I would not let my daughters out in the middle of the night. There are practical reasons why men go to war. There are practical reasons why we have evolved in that way. So is it a bad thing? The answer is more complex. There are ways it's evolved that is not good for women. And when we talk about solutions in the final section, then again, I will come back to this matter of competence and challenge Cross with that. So yes, patriarchy exists. Is it bad or not? It's a complex answer. It serves practical purposes. It could be harmful. And it does good things in many situations because they are pragmatic adaptation. And finally, I agree with Cross, actually, when he says that things have not changed. But again, that is me taking that broad view of my framework that the man 100,000 years ago and 40,000 years ago and today has organized society based on biology, pragmatic adaptation to biology, and then there's politics and power play around that. In that sense, society has not changed. But in the sense that we are using today's knowledge, technology, and advancement to equalize, as Yemi has said, there has been a lot of change. So it just depends on what you are looking at. Are we looking at the fact that even today, the man adapts to biology? Yes, women get 9 months of paternity leave. Yes, women still bear children and breastfeed. Yes, because of that, they lose out at work. Yes, because of that, men are in leadership positions. Yes, because of that, there's a gender pay gap. So that framework still explains how we organize today. But is it exactly the same as it was 10 years ago, 10,000 years ago? Absolutely no. The contraceptive pill, the ability to mobilize biology, technology has all increasingly equalized that. Ijabla, I must pass this on to you. We cannot take your agreement for granted.
No. What did you say?
Be.
What did I say that was dangerous?
I am acceptably disagreeing with Ijabla, your turn.
I said something that was dangerous, and you've not said what I said.
People can hijack.
No, but what did I say? No, you can't say I said. No, wait, no. You can't say I said something that was dangerous without focusing on that thing. And then
you'll get a chance to respond to that.
No, but I've not responded. I don't know what he said. He just said I've said something that's dangerous.
What you say,
I don't know what that is.
I mean, as long as you promise me that Jabs will speak next, I will tell you what you say that I think is dangerous.
We'll come back to it,
what you said was that patriarchy.
Just a strong word, but go on.
Yeah. No, what you said is that patriarchy is a reflection of competence. And the reason I describe it as dangerous is because it can be misunderstood. That's all. That's what I said. Jabs, your turn.
Okay. Right. So I think Farouk has kind of actually spoken my mind on this subject. Does patriarchy exist? Yes, it does exist. For the reasons we have already elaborated, mainly founded upon biology. Now, should we continue? So I would it depends on how the different definitions of patriarchy, but I am using it in the context of a system of power that seeks to keep men in position, advantage. That's how I'm going to be using patriarchy in this sense. And my only point is, should we continue to uphold that system, or should we change? Now, I don't know whether that is a subject that you're going to be talking about in the last section, Yemi, but are you happy for me to look at that now, or do you want me to?
Please, just speak as the Spirit leads.
As the Spirit leads, okay. As the Spirit leads, yes. So I'm going to take two examples, maybe. If we look at, let's say, being a laborer. Back in the days, men have to maybe physically lift heavy boulders and maybe heavy stones and move them from point A, which is, I don't know, maybe kilometers away from point B. But these days, there are machines. I mean, you can go into Tesco and see all these machines that they use to move sort of like heavy crates. Can women do that? Yes, because it's just literally pressing the button. So even the sheer force, the thing that gave us advantage and placed men in this position of physical dominance, is no longer as crucial today for survival as it was back then, because a woman any person can just press a button and move these massive objects around. So that's one example. Now, to come to the second example I'm going to use, obviously, is religion, because that's what we are focusing on.
Thanks for bringing it back to that.
Yes, that's what we're focusing on. So my question is there a reason that women cannot be bishops or priests or the Pope, for instance? What is it that makes? So again, this comes back again straight to the point I was making at the start, which is, how do we interpret scriptures? Do you interpret scriptures? Do you see them as like this immutable thing that can never change, or are they things that ought to change and adapt with time? So if we can make women if women can do the things that men have traditionally done, what is the reason? What is the argument against women not being able to be priests and all that? Is that patriarchy? Or would we say because it's religion, it's just tradition?
It goes back to my initial points I raised at the beginning of this conversation. I said there are two reasons why. Spiritual authority, religion, particularly most of the anthropomorphic ones and the Abrahamic religions, do not permit female leadership of anything within these areas. It's just what it is. It's like me going to a school and saying, you're a school, but now you need to become a police station. And then all the students that are there should be, it's like, it doesn't know. This is not what this is. We have a system, we have a head teacher, etc., all these kind of, structure, etc. We're not turning this into something else. That something else is something else. Go there and get that something else that you want. The second part is still on the conversations that we've had, but we've been having some aggression.
Would you say patriarchy then? Would you call it patriarchy?
I'm coming to that because I need to wrap up those things that we've talked about quite a few extensively, but I'm going to summarize them. But it comes back to biological capability, competence as well. About, generally speaking, should an interest is very important. I cannot overestimate this part of it. Most women are not interested in things that most men are interested in, including positions of power. A lot of people like the idea of power. A lot of people don't like the work required to get that power. And women generally, statistically speaking, tend to not focus on the skills, the endeavors, the careers that require them to get that power. They're just not interested in it. They're just not.
Let me interrupt you. I'm sure we will find women who will be interested in being priests, and
the exception makes to improve the rule. The exception doesn't. The exception itself, the idea you have to say, I can find some, means that you're proving the point that generally speaking, that's what most women don't want to do. I'm sure I can find some. Means there's a tiny little number. Sorry?
No, I don't think you understood me. My point is that there are women, there will be women, there are women who are in the places where women are allowed to be priests and to hold a sort of spiritual leadership position. There are women. They can fill those spaces. So if today we say we are going to allow female cardinals and female popes, there will be women.
There will be,
so there will be. So my point is, so I don't want to be misunderstood, because I know that this is a very complex subject, and I know that we're talking about religion, and religions are like, some rules are sort of like set in stones. Please don't misunderstand me. That's not, I understand that. But in spite of that, my question is it patriarchy that stops women from becoming bishops and cardinals and popes?
Can we do
something? Yes, but I've caveated that, which is that I know that it's sort of religion, but can we change that? Should we change that? Is it good?
Can we change? Sorry.
Wait. If your definition,
Farouk, just two lines.
If your definition,
Farouk, 2 lines. Just 2 lines. Can we change Virgin Mary to become Virgin Joseph? Would that make sense to us?
Okay, Farouk.
Jabs, if your definition of patriarchy is that there are things society does to retain the advantage men have or have accumulated over millennia, then that's patriarchy.
Thank you.
And also ideas that then sustain that. I think to answer Jab's question, I think I would actually even almost give an unqualified yes. So I think the reason that the Pope is always male is that if you're looking for an example of patriarchy, there you have it. Because everything in that one example, everything that we've discussed as a factor just coalesces into one.
Thank you. Because my point is this. So this is what I'm looking at this thing from. What harm is it going to do if a woman is in that position? You see, so these are the things I'm thinking about. What harm is a woman going to do if she were the Pope, or if cardinals were?
The question doesn't make sense. The question doesn't make sense. It's almost like asking what's north of the North Pole. It doesn't make sense. It's like saying to the thing I just raised now and saying, Can
Jones
we
have
change
agreed.
Virgin
Jones
Mary?
has agreed with us as well in the comment section. It
I-
is
fine.
patriarchy.
Yeah, fine. Well, I'm misaligned with him too, so it's fine. But the thing for me is this: you cannot say that why can't we have a male virgin father for Jesus as well? Is there anything stopping us from changing Virgin Mary into Virgin Joseph? It's like the question doesn't even make any sense.
Joseph doesn't have a womb.
Wait, one second. Let me
Joseph
explain.
doesn't have a womb. I cannot
Wait.
deliver of a child.
So I need
Let
to
me
have.
let me explain it, and I'm going to say exactly what you're saying. The concept of a virgin mother requires someone to give birth, etc. All those other things that come with being a female. The papacy was decided based on male characteristics. Now, we might not have documented it to the same
The papacy
degree.
is man-made. The papacy is man-made, whereas the womb and the gene and the biology is evolution. It's science.
If it's been
I
said,
think there's another explanation to that, Cross. Bear with me 1 second. So the reason it makes sense, contrary to what you've said, is that we're talking about things in two different directions here. So it doesn't make sense for me to imagine not being born in Nigeria, because it happened already. I was born in Nigeria, right? But it does make sense for me to imagine where I want to live in the future. Okay, so it doesn't make sense for us to begin to talk about being born of a virgin Joseph. I agree, it's happened, or at least that's how it's been framed. But what's going to happen in the future with popes is an open question. And so we can. And no, it is an open question. It is
why
an
is it an
open
open
question.
question?
Yeah,
It's
because
written into the
we were
Bible. The
first.
leadership of the church is by men, so it's there.
Yeah,
It's
but religion is a.
But this is what I'm saying. So this is where I'm coming. I'm looking at this conversation from, right? I'm looking at this conversation from the point of view of, is patriarchy good? Because Farouk alluded to that. When we asked that question, you said it depends on what it is. Like, so with everything, there's going to be pros and cons, right? So we have agreed that patriarchy does exist, and it's a system that
I don't agree with that. But go on.
Well,
I disagree that I disagree with the existence of a patriarchy.
No,
I believe there's a
you
competent
describe it as a
hierarchy.
manifestation of
I don't
competence.
agree.
So
men
it means,
men
you
and
describe it
women
as a manifestation of competence. So you
Correct.
recognize it exists.
No,
You
no,
don't think it's a bad thing.
I don't agree.
I think you view the patriarchy as a pejorative. That it's
No,
it's
well,
it's a pejorative description
no.
of.
The description of a patriarchy, the definition of a patriarchy, I disagree, exists. A patriarchy is a system that puts men above women by default, not by competence. That's my issue with the definition. I'm not talking about whether or not men run everything. That's a different definition from patriarchy. Patriarchy focuses on the idea that men do things that women can't, and men are allowed to do things that women cannot. That doesn't exist anymore. That's done. It still exists in Africa, so we can still talk about our African, the Pan-African conversation about it. I believe there's a patriarchy in Africa in which women are subdued and are subjugated to terms that men will not be, but that does not happen in the West. That's the reality.
So
of
what
the
just
situation.
happened? Why can't women be cardinals? The Roman
Because
Catholic churches in the West.
the two reasons I said. The first thing with it being the spiritual authority.
All right. Well, it's all over the world.
No, but it's because, again, spiritual authority. There's no basis in the Bible that gives women authority over men. It's not allowed.
I think all the writers of the Bible were men.
One second. Yemi gave already.
We're talking about.
No, but Yemi gave.
Cross. Yemi, correct me if I'm wrong. All the writers of the Bible were men.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Does that mean there's a
so and you are taking that as an authority in a conversation about the role of women?
The Bible. Jesus
and
chose men.
the writers of the Bible existed in society that was already patriarchal.
So
Jesus was supposed to be God, right? And if God came, or a son of God, or a messenger of God from the Islamic perspective, we're still talking about representation of God. This is not man. God himself came and said, listen, men are going to do XYZ thing. And then if we're looking at that and saying God is wrong, then that's a different conversation than what we're having. The conversation here we're having is why women can't still lead. And why can women lead with, well, we'll get to that one, but women can't lead in the religious perspective because God said so, period. It's not a difficult conversation.
But there'll be many religious people. There'll be many religious people that disagree with you.
I
Which
don't think
ones?
you've heard.
I mean,
I don't
which
think.
one?
I don't think you've heard about Paula White or Joyce Meyer before.
I know Paula White, yes. The
Right.
one that got into a scandal, whatever she got into.
Yeah.
I know Joyce May. I know all these people, yes.
So the point I'm trying to make by that is that what we
They're
are
wrong. They're not allowed to do that in
just-
Christianity.
just
Those are
let me finish.
Protestants.
No.
So they created that protesting against Christianity.
No. Just hang on a minute. So the point I'm trying to make by pointing out these women is that even within the Christian traditions itself, there are people who've interpreted.
Jones don't hammer you. He say you when don't believe in God, they use Bible, they defend your point. God don't catch you today.
Wait, no. So should we go through Jones's comments? Jones has a lot of comments. So
That
okay,
last
right,
one.
okay, all right. So Jones has got comments. Let's go through Jones's comments, right? Oga Cross, you must agree with me today. Agreeability is about attempting to understand another's worldview. It doesn't mean you agree with the point of view. I disagree because you're saying that I'm attempting to understand. You have to agree. Agreeability. You're trying to change the words to mean something it doesn't mean. Agreeableness means agreeing. You can't say it means something else. That's one. Oga Cross, if you don't agree with my last comment, you're being stubborn, not disagreeable. Very
So that's another concept now. There is agreeable, disagreeableness, and stubbornness.
Cross, I need to just plant a flag very quickly there. So I've just had a quick look. So Psychology Today, and I want to define agreeableness for you now because actually I think Jones is correct. So agreeableness is a personality trait that is described as cooperative, polite, kind, and friendly. It doesn't mean that you agree. It means that you
or disagree.
It means that you take a cooperative stance. Okay,
disagreeing.
And
just like Yemi does.
And there are leadership.
How can you cooperate and disagree?
No. And there are leadership roles where actually this is the form of this is the traits that will help you better than some other leadership roles. So it depends on what the
which ones. I mean, I'm yet to see any evidence for these conversations I hear. I keep hearing about how if organizations were far more feminine, and we've seen the ones that have failed. They're quite few experiments. I'm more than happy to share. I'm more than happy to share proof of them.
Jones don't define everything now. We now have 5 categories, guys. There is align, misalign, agree, agreeableness, disagreeableness, and stubbornness.
No, but yeah, I mean, I'm going to go back to the comments in a second. But yeah, I need to finish that point. Okay. That you cannot. This is disambiguation that I'm trying to do because what you're doing is ambiguation.
No, I'm just telling you the
I get it. But again, we're in the world right now where we had to get the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom to say a man is a man and a woman is a woman. It got so confusing. The Supreme Court.
No.
I get it.
You. No. It's you that I'm telling you the definition. I'm actually reading it to you. I'm not.
I get it. I don't. I'm not saying you're making anything up.
There's just one more line to read there. People high in agreeableness are more trusting, affectionate, altruistic, and generally displaying more pro-social behaviors than others. This is not what you're saying. It's not just rolling over like you're describing it to me.
I mean, the word. I mean, I get it, but you need to look at the etymology of the word. What does the word mean?
No. You can't say what the word means. So let me explain to you. There are technical words. We see this all the time where people come into a doctor and think that what the word. So, for example, when you say something is chronic, most patients, when they come to a doctor and say it's chronic, they're trying to tell you it's severe. That's not what doctors mean when they say it's chronic.
It means because we know the context of the word.
So again, that's what I'm telling you.
Agreeableness.
Yes, but when a psychologist tells you about agreeableness, I'm telling you what they mean. I'm just reading it out to you, and that's what.
Are you trying to drive me disagreeably? All over the place because what you're saying now. So what we need to do is
let's agree to disagree.
Wait.
Let's agree to disagree. Let's move to the next.
No. This is the disagreement. We cannot disagree on what disagree means. So if you're saying then that because these are all normal distributions, all of them are normal distributions. If you have agreeableness, very high agreeableness on the left, and you have high disagreeableness on the right, are you telling me then that someone that's on the left and on the right are going to agree generally, or they're going to behave the same way in terms of how they agree with propositions put across to them?
Okay. Let me explain this to you. So let me explain this to you. This is actually something that I'm fairly familiar with. Okay, I've decided to read it out, to almost take it away from one man's word against the other, but it's something that I'm fairly familiar with. So when it talks about agreeableness here, right, it's talking about a complex trait. It's not talking about the dictionary meaning of the word agreeable. It's talking about a complex trait. You're right that with this complex traits, women tend to be more represented at the higher, with more of it, put it that way, than men. It's true. The data on that is solid, and you're right about that. I don't disagree on that at all. The data is very good, and it's not fuzzy at all. It is very solid data. But having said that, it's not agreeing in a sense that I agree with you. That's not what it means. It's a complex trait, and what it means is a personality trait that can be described as cooperative, polite, kind, friendly, and trusting, affectionate, altruistic, generally displaying more prosocial behaviors than others.
Others needs ahead of yours.
Practical example of two leaders. A consultant on a ward with a team.
Yep.
Even though he's a male consultant, needs to be more agreeable in managing that team to deliver excellent healthcare versus a commander in the war front.
Yeah.
Under fire. Both are men. But it's not about agreeing or not agreeing. It's what motivates your team to deliver on the objectives of the team.
Yeah.
On a ward, on a shop floor, you may be male or female. What kind of skill set do you need?
It's not agreeableness.
That's agreeableness. That's kind of a scenario where you need cooperation. You need to get people's buy-in. Under fire, in the battlefront, in the trenches, you tell your troops to move. They don't move. You shoot them. You cut martial them.
That doesn't have anything to do with agreeableness. I'm just
trying to help. I'm just trying to help define that term. My interest right now is to move to solutions. How do we unpack patriarchy? How do we engage? Yes. How do we unpack patriarchy? How do we? Because I think for our female viewers out there, I am an ally. I want to dismantle patriarchy.
You want to dismantle patriarchy?
Yeah.
Farouk is the ultimate patriarch. I can see that.
Yes. And a feminist. So I want to dismantle it. And I played with this idea a long time. And I think basically what we need to do is dismantle reset the incentives to dismantle the framework. So at the beginning of the conversation today, I talked about biology, the male size and strength, the female womb and mammary glands, and how that went on to hunting, defending, gathering, and accumulation of power and wealth, and the incentives of that, and how the womb and the mammary gland led to pregnancy, childbirth, caring, and how through evolution we've ended up where we are, and then how patriarchy tries to stop us from unbundling that and equalizing that. What can we do? We need to realign the incentives. Reward breastfeeding. Reward pregnancy. The way you reward CEOs. This is hypothetical. It's never going to happen. The way you reward with the influence, power, and money, you reward popes. Given that that's where we started this off. You reward CEOs. You reward managers. And watch it all fall apart. Patriarchy is about trying to corner advantage and power. It's where it is, but you don't want to give it up. If you paid pregnant women, breastfeeding women, carers, nurses, as much as you pay bankers and financiers and astronauts and pilots, if you rewarded in terms of this, all hypothetical, it won't happen. If we found a framework or a society where these female-dominated industries and where their traits lead them are rewarded equally as you would reward the powerful kings and popes and ayatollahs in terms of influence and power, it all falls apart.
That's never going to happen because of the principle of demand and supply.
It's never going to happen. So it's never going to happen. This is all hypothetical. But if you want to understand it, If because a woman is pregnant, she has power and influence. This is trying to re-engineer. It's never going to happen. But if we found ways, even a little bit, to reward these things more, it will equalize the gap of wealth and power. It will reset the incentives. Maybe men will now want to go and acquire wombs and carry babies and breastfeed just to get all of that benefit. It's never going to happen. So in practical terms, what can we do? There are the practical things we do. Allow people to do what they want to do. Use technology. Use evolving conversations, evolving understandings, and engage pragmatically. It's never going to happen. And in that sense, I'm aligned with Cross that society is in many ways the same as it was 10,000 years ago. We organize based on how we are. It is what it is, but we can keep evolving in a positive direction. So that's kind of my hypothetical solution to it. And practically, we just have to keep slow change. I'm not going to say any church or any religious group should accept women or not, but those conversations are happening. As I said earlier, change is happening. We had a Protestant movement. We have female people now. There was unfortunately even within Islam, people are evolving, groups are evolving, and things are changing. It's slow, and it has to be slow. So that's kind of it from me.
So the way I see this is that I feel that I believe in cooperation, and I think that that's the sort of world that I want to see and I want to live in. And we are in a position now where technology has allowed us more or created more opportunities for us to equalize those disadvantages that women suffered because of their biology. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel, I would say, Farouk. I think that things like maternity leave, paternity leave, that we can make them maybe more, generous. Women are always going to carry babies, so we have to just accept that we can't do anything about that. I don't think we have to accept that they're going to take time out to be pregnant, to look after the children, but we also want children who are going to be valued and become very useful members of the society. So they need to be looked after, they need to be nourished, and if women do that, I think that job should be very well compensated or remunerated, whichever language you want to use. With the Cardinals and the church, yes, we understand that it's faith based, and yes, I think that in the case of the Catholic Church, I think that it's one of those conservative institutions that believes that God dictated it and it's immutable. That's how it's going to be for the rest of time. My argument would be that is a classic example of patriarchy, because that is a system that advantages men over women. I can't see why a woman, sorry, I beg your pardon, cannot be a pope or a bishop or a cardinal. I see nothing that a man can do in that role that a woman cannot do. So, whether that would change or not, we'll have to wait and see. But the things that we can control in civil society, I think we're already doing those. We just maybe need to just double down and make sure that we make it as equitable as possible. I'm not using the word equality because men and women cannot be equals or are not equals, but I think we can make things equitable. Thank you.
Cross. Yeah, the floor is yours. You can pour your heart out now. I'd say you've got up to 5 minutes. Just tell us why everyone else is wrong.
So before Cross goes on, I want to say thank you to everyone. I have to leave now. It's been engaging. It's been exciting. And thanks to Jones, now we've learned a new category. We will keep engaging. Take care, everybody, and bye-bye.
Thank you, Farouk.
Yes, Farouk.
Yeah, bye.
Right, Cross.
So my own view is quite simple. It's quite straightforward. One, there's no ecclesiastical authority for that permits women to become sorry, let me adjust this a little bit, that permits women to become leaders within the church. I think that completely changes or removes validity of the church existing, because it's quite clear that women should not be leaders in the church. I think trying to force that to change is very similar to trying to say men are women or women are men. We've come to this point in society where the Supreme Court has to come out to say that is not the case. I do not think we need a Supreme Court in the church to say women should not lead in the church. It doesn't make sense. We shouldn't have female imams. It's nuts that we're even having this kind of conversation, because women should stay and do what they should do. You want to build a business and become a CEO, fine. Men should also stay and do what they should do. A man should not go into a woman's toilet. That is my personal opinion about this situation. I don't think there's any reason why we need to be blurring boundaries. If these boundaries work, why are we changing them? And that's the thing that I look at. When we look at egalitarianism, which is something that you've already alluded to as well, Jab, and I imagine we're probably going to have a few conversations about this. Gender pay gap is a conversation I had with someone very close to me yesterday about the gender pay gap, and then a conversation as well about egalitarianism, which we can have both. But the reality is, it doesn't work. The more egalitarian a society becomes, the more men and women tend to fall into their traditional roles. If you go to Scandinavia, the studies are, there's a plethora of studies looking at this, that when you go to societies where there's that push to equalize, because again, it's not really equal, but it's equity-ish. I disagree with equality of outcomes over equality of opportunity, but that's a slightly different conversation. When we focus on that equalization of humans, of genders, it doesn't work. Men and women tend to focus even more on the more traditional roles and more traditional aspirations, rather than in countries where that delineation is not that clear. For example, in Nigeria, where we're from, in Nigeria, you're more likely to have more boss babes, more driven women going into engineering, going into just more masculine sorts of roles and opportunities, because it's not very egalitarian. If you go to the Scandinavian countries, like I said, the studies have shown this, that women tend to move into more traditional female roles, and the men are harder moving into more masculine roles. I think the reality is that people are going to be what people are. People are going to do what people have always done, because we have 6 million, well, 6 to 8, depending on how you're calculating it. We have 6 million years of evolution that's pushed us to where we are, 100,000 of which we have existed as Homo sapiens. In these 100,000 years, we've done the things that have driven us to where we are today. Attempting to change this in a couple of years, which is what we're trying to do, it's just a ridiculous attempt in futility. It's not going to work. People are going to be interested in what people are going to be interested in. We're going to be competent in what we're competent in.
We should never have bothered with antibiotics then.
How does that turn into
it's altered our biology remarkably. So the life expectancy now has almost tripled over the last 100 years, like times 3.
Okay, how does that?
That is us altering biology in remarkable ways. So we've gone from living.
It's not altering. It's augmenting. It's not changing. Antibiotics don't change how we think, how we behave, or how we act. It changes our chemistry. It's different. It's a completely different concept. So you can, for example, the foods that we eat. When we used to eat food before cooking, right? And then we used to eat raw fruits, vegetables, probably even raw meat at some point, even though we're not generally able to do that. That's again another conversation that'll be interesting to have, because I've got this idea that I think humanity isn't necessarily from Earth. We can explore this as a very interesting kind of conversation when we go to the weirder conversations. But we cooked food, but then we didn't need to spice or salt them. And then we spiced and salted food, and then we started drying food, and then we started freezing it. Does that mean we're altering our biology? We're still eating. It doesn't change anything about what that means.
It does. So the point I'm making, it does. It changes a lot of our capabilities. So if you think about some of the, I'll explain. So in the way that some of the things that we do is intricately tied to the threats, the risks, and the availability of resource. And that's how we've actually And you've mentioned it quite rightly. That's how some of those gender roles have actually come out of. They've come out of the threats that we faced from the way resources, the way we attend them. What I am saying to you is, over time, we've used technology to make a lot of changes to that. So things that used to they're different threats now. They're very different to what they used to be. And there are different ways in which resources get allocated now. I don't have to spend all of my day hunting or gathering. Okay. And so that has changed even our sociology. It's changed how men and women relate to each other. I mean, it has, because if I had to spend,
I don't think it
no,
has.
no,
I can tell you why.
no, it has. So
I
I'm
can
not
tell you.
saying
I can tell you it hasn't.
so I'm not saying it's altered it 100%. It's changed significantly.
It hasn't changed the fundamentals. I mean, if it changed even,
I think what I'm hearing is that Cross
sorry,
is that if
okay.
things we can't change things, so there's no need to try. That's
no. That's not my point. Okay, so
okay, so just to jump in very quickly. This is last word now. We've got 1 minute each. Last word.
You didn't even let me even go. You said 5 minutes. I was going like 2.5, and then you cut in and you would change the conversation.
Okay. So you get 3 minutes, and the rest of us get
fantastic.
1 minute. Last word.
The thing you're pointing out here, the challenge with that is that the reality hasn't changed what people want. So women don't need men that are taller than them anymore, because they don't require that biological difference. They don't need men that are stronger than them anymore. They don't need men that are more intelligent than them. They don't need men that earn more money in terms of resources, which is conversion from meat to now it's cash. They don't need men who have a social network, a wider social network. They don't require any of these things. However, they're still attracted to them. Why? Can you change that? You can go all you want.
Yes, you can.
Tell women.
You can. And in fact, it is changing. So you're right.
It's not changing.
So the thing is that we don't actually misalign to the extent you think we do. Because you're right. So some of those changes then become ingrained and feed back into biology. Because part of how this happens, how I understand it, I'm just having my last word as well, is these things are they're different frameworks of thinking about the issue, but there's a feedback loop. So the biology feeds into the sociology, which then feeds back, right? So you're right, there's still a lot of artifacts, massive amounts of artifacts from our biology, but it is changing.
The requirement there's no evidence for what you're saying. So what you're saying, there's no proof, because all of the different societies, whether we're talking about China, Africa, England, South America, it's still the same. That in the Middle East, the dynamic is the same. Women still want the same thing. Men still want the same thing. We still look for the same things, regardless of culture. We're still the same. Over the changes that have occurred, we're not changing. We're the same.
You've got a point there. Certainly, you've got a point there. Even though, this is final word. You're closing us.
Okay. Well, I think all that's left is for me to just thank our viewers. I think
we have comments, though. By the way, there's
comments.
Please, so
let's do the comments as well, please.
Yeah, okay. After you're done, Jab, then.
Yeah, no. All I really want to say is the kind of world I want to live in is one where that is governed by cooperation. I think that it's important that all humans are treated with dignity. I am opposed to any system that advantages one group over another, including patriarchy. And in the context of the papacy, I think that is a system that puts men in an advantaged position. I'm hoping that someday we'll come to that position where all people are allowed to aspire to whatever position they wish. Thank you.
So final comments. Should just run through the comments then. So the last comment, although all of them are obviously tackling me about my position, which I'm more than happy to take on. So Oga Cross, if you don't agree with my last comment, then you're being stubborn, not disagreeable. Fair enough. I'll take that on the chin. Oga Cross, women weren't allowed to lead in religion because the patriarchs of said religion practice in irrational patriarchy. So unless you're saying Jesus is irrational, I mean, I can't argue with you. If you're saying that Jesus, and if you're saying that Muhammad and all of those who came down from their religion to be able to determine how those religions worked were irrational, I can't argue with you. That's your prerogative on that one. Irrational patriarchy causes irrational patriarchy because women weren't given the chance to lead and fail, whereas women would fail as leaders and would be replaced by other men just because. Again, I can't. We're talking strictly about the religious perspective. Is the exact same concept. If you want to argue with the things that were set down, that's what they set down. I'm not religious. I used to be religious, as Jab particularly, he knows this because we've had a few interesting conversations about this. But no, and then
yeah, no, I think I agree. I agree with him because again, religion, it is the tradition, isn't it? It is a form of culture. So he is right. I agree with him 100%. Yeah, I agree with him.
Fair enough. I mean,
Okay.
I guess you can. I just can't argue with, because we're either saying religion is from God or it isn't. If we're questioning it to this degree, then it's not.
I knew that we could go on and on and on and on.
Yeah, let me just finish because it won't be fair to them to anyone commenting.
Please,
Don't go.
just do the comments.
Yeah. There's no list of leadership qualities that doesn't include personality traits. Does it then mean that those personality traits are exclusive to men? No, we just talked about that, and it's a spectrum across the ocean that talks about men and women and where they stay on this. I can share that in the chat, a link to the studies that have shown where men and women generally on average sit. That's a separate conversation. And C-Cross, where no belief for Bible, they no believe Bible, they quote Bible. Well, yes. Jones, I know you know that I know the Bible and I've read it.
That is one of the hallmarks of patriarchy.
Exactly, I'm a patriarch. That's what it is. At the end of the day, that's the whole story about everything I've had a conversation about today. I'm a patriarch. I am patriarchy. Look at me. But Yemi, I hand over to you to do the end piece.
No, I think it's been a fab day. Thanks everyone. Thanks Jones. Thanks everyone else who's listened. Jab, Cross, and Farouk. I think it's. I've had fun. I've enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. Let's do this again next week, same time.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Take care. Have a good day. Misaligned.